you gotta have reverb. That's reverb. It was just born today. Check it out. Here is the unopened package. BYOC Reverb Kit. Here's the PC board, bag of parts, the instructions are all online. Seem to be very good quality. So far so good. And here's all the parts. Trying to keep them all kind of sort of organized. And of course, this is going to be a really easy build because this is basically the brains of the whole thing right here. Pop everything onto the circuit board and off you go, right? Okay, so populating the board with resistors, it's a pretty simple, straightforward thing when you're building a kit like this. Well, I put all the resistors in, but the locations are all marked with the values. So I would highly suggest you put them in, bend the leads over so they don't fall out, and don't solder them into place until you know that you have all of them and they're all the correct value. Now, quick note about resistors, they're not the most accurate devices you've ever come across in your life. For example, this is the this is the 1 meg. This one right here. We'll do that. So part tolerances with little parts like this is roughly 10% or more. So don't freak out if your resistor value isn't exactly dead on. It'll be fine. Step 1 complete. All resistors in place, soldered to the board. The diode is polarized. You'll see one side, the left side here, if you can see that, has a little notch. I'm sorry, not a notch, a little stripe on the left side. And that is going to correspond with a little stripe right here. This is a 4001 diode, super common. Let's see on the other side. Okay, next step is the IC sockets. And you'll notice on the board there is a little notch right here, which is going to correspond with a little notch in the socket. Okay, now we are into the capacitors. These are film capacitors, and BYOC has made it super easy for us. For example, here it just says 104 on this location here. If you look on one of these handy dandy little bad boys, what's it gonna say on it? There it is. So it says 104J, and if you really want to know, you can just pull up one of these handy dandy charts online, and that will tell you exactly what the, so according to this, 104 is 0.1 microfarads. For the purposes of this build, you don't necessarily need to know that. You just pop them in the right spots, and presumably it's going to work. We'll see momentarily. And as I forgot to mention, these film capacitors do not have polarity, so you can just pop them in however they'll fit. solder them into place, and you should be good to go. Okay, next step is the voltage regulator. It's this little guy right here. It looks a lot more like a transistor, and what you'll notice is, hard to see, isn't it? He's got a flat side here, and then he's rounded here. On the board, what we have, this is his location, flat side here, and they've kind of made an attempt to look at like it's rounded, but you get the idea. Okay, now it's time to put in the polarized caps. These have a positive and a negative side. The cap, the capacitor itself, will have a little stripe here for the negative side, and the negative lead will actually be shorter than the positive lead. And the positive lead will go into the square solder pad. See if you can see this. The positive lead's going to go here in the square solder pad. Okay. The other way you can double check yourself and make double dog sure that you've got those in polarized correctly. Look at the picture of a finished one. So here we have the negative side. It's a little hard to see. The negatives are all facing downward in this position. So double check. Measure twice, cut once. Okay, another cool thing that we have built in, we're putting the battery clip in. The PC board itself comes with a bit of strain relief. So we'll do the positive side first. It comes through the hole like so, and then we're going to solder it in place. That way if it gets pulled, obviously it's not going to pull directly onto the solder joint. I can't tell you how many times that has happened. These solder joints are not the toughest things in the world. You can quite easily tear them right off the board with your bare hands. Not bragging. Okay, now we're going to start prepping the jumpers. We go from the PC board to other places. I'll show you one of my favorite tools of all time. Yes, my friends think I'm a wuss for using this, but it's so fast and easy. You just select your gauge of wire. Make sure it's all nice and straight in. And there you go. A nice, cleanly, perfectly stripped chunk of wire. The Catapult by Klein. Lots of people make them. Klein makes a really expensive one. Klein makes really, really good tools. See how fast that goes. So the other thing that you want to do with jumpers is tin the tip. So you're going to add a little bit of solder directly to the tip, and I would use my helping hands to hold the to hold the wire. My helping hands right at the moment are holding the camera and allowing me to film this video. So there's other things you can do if you don't have helping hands. You can do that number. Da, 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 da. We're going to tin all these tips, add the jumpers, and go on to the next step. Okay, that's where we are at this point. We're on step 9 according to the instructions. It's time to add the reverb module, which is kind of the heart and soul of this whole thing. It's apparently going to be mounted on the underside of the PC board, and it says, but first, take a break. And it's kind of funny, because I actually just did. I went and got myself a banana, because I was a little hungry. So at this point, if that thing's going to be mounted somewhere on the underside, I would say, oh yeah, probably right over here, right? There's a lot of flux left over from soldering all these joints on the underside. So at this point, grab some handy dandy isopropyl alcohol and Q-tip. Get rid of some of that flux. And as I've said before, this is kind of one of my favorite parts. Just cleaning everything up. So that'll get rid of all that flux that's excess on the board. It'll make it look a lot neater. And I've said before is flux. Anything that you leave on the board can collect dust, grime, whatever. It's just a bunch of junk you don't need on your PC board if you can help it. And at this point, we can help it. So when we put the module on, it's going to be pretty much on there. Oh, permanently. I have to pour alcohol on everything. It's just alcohol. And you'll have these little fibers here that you want to get rid of everything off of your PC board that's not supposed to be there. So this takes a little while. I won't bore you with the rest of it. I'll show you what it looks like after it's done. Okay, and there is the reverb unit. You can't put it in wrong. It only goes in one place. It goes on the bottom. It's all plastic, so it's not going to short anything out on the underside, and it looks kind of cool. Here we are. Okay, now we are looking at the enclosure. You can buy these kits with or without the enclosure. There's a whole bunch of options. You can get them with internally or externally threaded jacks. Alrighty. Pop that bad boy in. Okay, now it's time to put the potentiometers and the LED in. You really can't do this wrong because one of the pots is has a double set of contacts. There's only one place it can go, here. The other one has the single set. Do not solder anything into place yet. Oh, the very first step was actually, there's a couple of tabs for mounting. I don't know if you can see this, but right here, we broke those off so that when the potentiometer is mounted, it can be flush mounted to that level. So, oh, you want to remove the nut and washer, set them aside so that they are easily accessible. See you in a minute. Okay, so now what they're wanting us to do is to pop the potentiometers and the LED in. And just kind of spot check. That's going to go, and they want this to fit into the enclosure. Okay, this is why you needed a little bit of play with the pots. And you can see the LED is not sticking through, that's going to have to be adjusted height-wise. So what I'm going to do, just kind of approximate. You see how this top portion of this potentiometer is roughly where the enclosure is going to be. So I'll use that as a kind of a little guide for the LED, and then I'll use my little bendy leads trick just to kind of keep the pots in place. Now take note which side of the PC board that we're actually working on right now. It's a good thing we didn't decide to solder anything yet. It's the first time I just tried to spot this. I actually mounted the pots on the wrong side of the PC board. No es bueno. That's going to be more like it. Da-da-da. Okay. Now you can actually put the washer and nut on, and just kind of finger tight these right now. You don't want to tighten them up. Just yet. Okay, there's that. Get that LED placed a little better. That's about where it's going to be. Good enough. I'm not a big fan of those super bright LEDs anyway, so for me, that's going to be just fine. That's starting to look like a pedal now, isn't it? See that? I think this hole is drilled a little bit small so that LED isn't actually protruding, but I think it'll be enough to actually see when it's engaged. So solder the LED in place. Okay, so the next step is the jack. Now they have labeled the contact tip, sleeve, and battery on the jack itself. Pointer. There we go. It's these three contacts on the battery, and then they're going to these three contacts on the PC board. Now, if it was me, and it is me, I think this would have been a lot easier to solder the leads onto this jack before it was installed, maybe even color code them, which is what I'm going to do. So I'm going to pull that jack out, put some jumpers on these contacts, and then install them on the PC board. Be right back. Okay, so what I've done is color coded everything so I don't have to think about it when I put it back in. We have on the directions, tip is negative, so that's my black wire. Sleeve is going to positive, so that's my red wire. And then the one in the center they call battery. Hey, now here, do not forget to put your nut back on. This is one of those things that I've done more times than I like to remember. There we go. Now we'll pop the nut on there. We'll orient them correctly, and in business we will be. I'll be back in a minute. Okay, and there's how came out. Not the prettiest thing I've ever done, but that's how I make sure that I am oriented correctly and have good connection, and knock on wood, work the first time around. And now it's time to install the jacks. The input jack has 3 lugs. Output jack has 2 lugs. The input jack goes on the left side as you're facing the unit upside down, as we are. So when you're mounting it, don't forget to put the lugs up, so that obviously we're going to be soldering to these lugs. The instructions don't make this terribly clear which side goes under which, so I went back and looked at the completed picture. Okay, and once again, I'm just going to make these finger tight at first, because you don't want to go making decisions before you have to. Remember, we may be taking this whole thing apart to do troubleshooting later, remember? Okay. And next is the foot switch. There's going to be several jumpers, I'm assuming, between here. We'll see. Let's look at where the jumpers go first, and we'll make decisions from there. Alright, so as long as the lugs are horizontal rather than vertical, you can see that? Horizontal, vertical. And they're just calling them from the top left down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. It's just a series of jumpers to do now, which I'm going to try and do with it in place. So I've got a million of these. Shouldn't be that big of a challenge. I will wire this bad boy up and see you in just a second. Alrighty, and there's all the jumpers installed onto the foot switch. The couple of things to note: this little guy that goes between number 4 and number 9, make double dog sure that he's not shorting against these other 2 lugs. That's why I've got him kind of in a little Z shape there. And then once again they're numbered 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and then the board is numbered accordingly. Of course, there's no 9 on the board. There's no 3 or 6. So should be able to just make jumpers, pop them over there, and looks like we'll probably wire the jacks up, and we're getting pretty close. And just FYI, that was the longest amount of time that the video was paused. By far, was wiring up all these jumpers. And there it is with the jumpers. The lead lengths on the instructions seem to have worked out just fine. And that's what she looks like. Yep, and the next step is wiring up the jacks. And just a few things to note. I'll usually make myself a little hook, like so. On to the lug, a little pinch so it doesn't move anywhere when you're soldering. And then let's see if we can get this a little closer so you can see it. Make sure that when you're soldering, this lug is obviously a lot thicker. It takes a little longer to heat up than a wire does, so I'd be afraid to use a little more heat there. Make sure that it's not quite. Make sure that there we go, and everything's flowing a little better. Make sure that hole is completely filled and that those joints are nice and shiny. You'll thank yourself later for doing a good job of soldering now. Get those other two going, pop the ICs in, and I think that's about it. Okay, now it's time to install the ICs, and they do have to be oriented correctly. How do you do that? Well, they will have, see the little shiny dot there? That little dot corresponds to the notches. Right here, see on the top as we're looking at it here. There's a notch on the top of the socket here, the bottom of the socket is flat. So the little dot is on the same side as the notch. Okay, that's what it looks like finished up. So let's do the first functional test. The Boss adapter. Double check. Always double check. Make sure your adapter says it's got a 9-volt output. Right there. I'm just going to see if the LED lights up. And the jack is inserted. Oh, look at that! Sweet. Grab a guitar. Let's go to my bench amp. You can hear it. There we go. Well, okay, so it's passing signal. Bypass. We'll fire it up. That's okay. That's both of the controls down. So this is reverb, this is dwell. Turn that up. Woo! Look at that. See how crazy it gets. That's not half bad. Crank it all the way up. Woo! Oh. That truly was. That was the first time I fired it up on camera, and it worked. First time around. Okay, one small problem. You probably saw me having a little bit of issue with that jack. Being stuck right about there, so I'll show you what's happening is you put the plug in. The jack is actually hitting the PC board right there. See that on the left side? So let me rotate this bad boy just a little bit. Should get plenty of clearance. There we go. That's what it should feel like. Much gooder. Okay, one other little issue I want to address before I button it up is the lugs that are furthest up or down on the bottom, however you want to look at it. They could potentially be in danger of shorting out to the bottom cover when it's installed. Likely not, because you know this is not completely flat. Just to be sure that we're not going to have an issue there, what we'll do is put a little piece of heat shrink. Oop. Touch that guy. heat shrink on the lug, just like so. And you can see particular size of heat shrink is you probably don't even have to heat it up because it's likely never going to go anywhere. And don't forget to put your jumper back. This is Cassie. She doesn't care about reverb.